What if the island you thought was paradise had been waiting for you all along? Will and his friends set sail for an uncharted island known only by whispers. Jarrett B. What began as a thrill-seeking expedition quickly unraveled into a fight for survival against something ancient and watching. Disappearances, rituals, mutations. One by one, the truth claws its way to the surface. There are no accidents here, only choices, and some of them were never yours to make. This isn't just a horror story, it's a curse you'll carry with you long after the last word. Are you ready to know why the island never lets anyone truly leave? The first thing we saw wasn't sand. It was skulls. Half buried beneath the low tide, they peeked from the reef bed like forgotten relics of war. Pitted bone, chipped teeth, sockets staring blankly into the blazing Caribbean sun. Hundreds of them scattered along the coral flats like a warning carved from time. Robert stood beside me, silent for once. Even Charlie didn't speak. We'd been joking non-stop for the last 2 hours, about buried treasure, about becoming rich enough to drop out, about putting the trip on YouTube. But now, no one even reached for their phone. Aztec, Abdul muttered behind us, his low voice barely rising above the lapping waves. Spanish slavers brought them here. Couldn't bury them on the mainland. Too cursed. Jesus, Marcy whispered, stepping back from the bones. She glanced at a crab picking through a jawbone like it was just another rock. Liv shivered, pulling her hoodie closer. They look too clean. Abdul grinned. The sea preserves what it needs. Then he hoisted our duffel bag from the boat and waved toward the hill. Come on, sunset waits for no one. We followed him inland, stepping gingerly between ribs and skull fragments, boots crunching over bone. I tried not to look too closely. One of them had a golden tooth. Another had a tiny hole bored into the forehead, execution style. The village sat hunched along the inner shore, its dozen cabins tangled in creeping vines and salt-bleached wood. The windows were closed, the doors bolted. No signs of life, yet we knew people were inside. Curtains twitched as we passed. Eyes watched from cracks in the shutters. No one greeted us. Friendly crowd, Robert muttered, adjusting the camera strap on his shoulder. They don't like outsiders, Abdul said simply. They remember what happened last time. Last time? I asked. He didn't answer. Our cabin was set farther up the slope, tucked behind a cluster of palms and a crooked mango tree. It was better than I expected. 3 rooms, a working sink, and electricity powered by a rusted generator outside. But the floor creaked with every step, and the air smelled like mildew and something faintly metallic. Charlie tried his phone. No signal, no bars, not even a faint chirp from GPS. Of course, he sighed. Place is off-grid as hell. Didn't you say you wanted to unplug? Liv teased, but even she looked unsettled. I handed Abdul the money. 3 20s. He counted them slowly like they meant more than dollars. I'll return Sunday, he said, folding the bills into his vest. If you're still alive. His smile didn't reach his eyes. That night, we sat on the porch drinking warm beer from the cooler and watching the jungle swallow the last rays of light. The bones were still on my mind, lurking beneath every wave like buried guilt. Not a lot of birds here, Charlie commented. Not a lot of anything, Marcy replied, hugging her knees. Robert cracked another beer. We're not here for wildlife. We're here for treasure. We all laughed, but it felt forced. Will remembered this, I told myself. This was the moment. Things still felt normal. Before the silence became a voice. Before the sand began to whisper. The next morning we made our way to the North Cliffs. It was 3 miles through scrub and stone, guided by an old survey map Randy had once drawn for me on a napkin. This is where I found it, he'd said, tracing the line with his knuckle. But it goes deeper. Always deeper. The reef shelf sloped down into a narrow trench, a jagged crack in the seafloor. Perfect diving weather. Calm, clear, deceptively harmless. Charlie suited up first. He always did. then Robert, then me. The water was warm at first, then colder, then wrong. I don't know how else to describe it. There was no current, no fish, no sound, just this crushing sense of waiting, like the ocean knew we were there and was trying to decide what to do with us. I dove deeper. At 20 meters, I should have turned back, but something glimmered along the wall. An indentation, a tunnel veiled in algae and silt. I swam toward it. The tunnel descended another 10 meters before opening into a chamber, round, smooth, and unnaturally symmetrical. Pillars lined the sides, carved from black stone veined with veins of silver. Not coral, not volcanic, something else, something made. At the center, buried halfway in sand and calcified mud, was a statue, about the size of a toddler, curled into the fetal position. Wings, no, fins, folded across its back like bat leather. Its face was not a face, just a mouth, a smiling mouth full of needle teeth, and tendrils spilling down its chin. I should have left it, but I touched it. It was warm. I surfaced after nearly 45 minutes. Robert was already on the shore, dripping wet and sunburned. "Will, you find anything?" he called. I waded toward him, the statue in my arms. "Yeah," I said, breathless. "Something old." Charlie squinted at it. "That's not Mayan. That's not Aztec. That's cursed," Marcy cut in, eyes wide. "We laid it on the porch that night. No one touched it again. No one spoke. We just drank and watched it, lit by the soft orange glow of the propane lamp. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, I saw Liv standing over it. She was whispering, not to us, to it. And I swear, it whispered back. I didn't sleep. Something about the statue kept my eyes open long past midnight. I heard it in the wood, in the cracks of the walls, in the insect buzz outside that abruptly stopped around 2 a.m. Silence pressed against the cabin like a tide, the kind that drowns you slow. I got up and walked to the porch. The air was damp, thick, the kind of humidity that sticks to your lungs. The lamp was still on, casting a sickly yellow glow over the floorboards. The statue was there, just like we left it. Only, it wasn't. It had moved. Just a little. Its orientation was different. Before it had been curled slightly to the left. Now its arms, those bent, webbed things, were tucked tighter to the chest. The mouth was slightly open. I could see the tips of teeth. I took a step back. The floor creaked. Inside, someone was whispering. At first, I thought it was Liv again, but the voice was wrong. Too low, too wet. I turned. The lamp flickered, dimmed, and then it was gone. The next morning, we woke to find Charlie already gone. His bed hadn't been slept in, and his gear was missing. His boots were gone, but he left his backpack and phone. Robert cursed under his breath. This is why we shouldn't have come. He's probably off poking crabs or some stupid... No, I said, staring at the empty porch. He wouldn't leave without telling us. Abdul wasn't due back for 4 more days. No cell service, no working radio. The only path back to the beach was through dense brush and miles of reef. Charlie knew that. He wouldn't just wander. We spread out and searched. The forest behind the cabin was dense with hanging moss and vines like rotting veins. We called his name for nearly an hour. Nothing answered. Until Robert stepped on something. It cracked. We looked down. A tooth. Small, yellowed, human, still wet. Robert backed away, muttering curses, then froze. "Will," he pointed. 30 feet ahead, past a clump of ferns, the brush was flattened in a strange circular pattern, like something had rolled there. Or slithered. At the center was one of Charlie's fins, torn clean in half. We didn't talk much after that, just walked back to the cabin in silence, the statue watching us from the porch, its smile a little wider than before. That night, the dreams came. I was underwater again, deeper than before. lightless, weightless. The walls of the reef fell away, and I was inside something enormous. A mouth made of stone, teeth formed from coral, ribs like canyon walls. Inside it, shapes moved. Not fish, not anything I'd ever seen. They pulsed with phosphorescent veins and chanted in a guttural rhythm that vibrated through my chest. One shape drifted closer. It looked like Charlie, until it smiled. Its mouth opened too wide, eyes clouded, no voice, just bubbles. Bubbles that spelled a word, Jarrett. I woke with blood on my tongue and the taste of salt in my mouth. Robert packed his bag the next morning. We're leaving. I don't care if Abdul's not back yet. We can hike the reef line until we hit signal. You saw what happened, I said. You think the island's just going to let us walk away? Don't give me that horror movie crap, he snapped. Charlie probably tripped and hit his head. The statue's just a rock. Then why haven't the villagers said a word since we got here? Liv asked quietly. Why do they keep their windows shut even in daylight? Why did that woman yesterday make a sign when she looked at us, like she was trying to ward off a plague? Robert said nothing. Marcy, pale and quiet until now, finally spoke. We should put it back. What? The statue. It's not ours. It's not meant to be here. Maybe if we return it. To where? I asked. I don't even know how I found that tunnel, but I did. I could feel it calling. That evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, I walked alone back toward the northern cliffs. The jungle whispered things I didn't want to understand. Leaves moved without wind. Somewhere nearby, a branch snapped in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. The reef looked different this time. Lower tide, darker water. I slipped on my gear, barely breathing, and descended. The trench was waiting. Wider than before, the tunnel led me again to the chamber, but the statue's pedestal was gone. As if the seabed had swallowed it whole, I dropped down and placed the statue into the sand. For a moment nothing happened, then the ground trembled. The walls of the chamber pulsed like lungs, and behind me a voice, not heard but felt. One returns. One must stay. I turned. No one was there, but something had opened on the far wall, a passage I hadn't seen before, and from inside a sound. Wet dragging, bones scraping, gills clicking. I left the statue and swam hard, faster than I ever had, up and up and up, lungs burning. I surfaced into night. No stars, no moon. Just the silhouette of the island, now somehow darker, sharper. When I reached the shore, I realized I wasn't alone. Lib was waiting, eyes wide, pale. He came back, she whispered. Who? Charlie. Except it wasn't Charlie. Standing at the edge of the tree line was something wearing his shape. Too tall, too thin, eyes black as oil, and its mouth. God, its mouth. Smiling wide, full of teeth too many for one skull. It raised a hand, waved, and then it whispered my name. No one ever tells you what to do when your best friend comes back wrong. We locked the cabin doors, all of them, even the attic. It was absurd, but nobody laughed. No one even spoke above a whisper. The thing that looked like Charlie hadn't come closer after waving. It just stood at the edge of the jungle, half hidden in the shadows, like it was waiting for something. Like we were the ones supposed to make the next move. Marcy curled up in her bunk with her knees to her chest. Liv sat cross-legged near the fireplace, her knuckles white where they clenched the old spiral journal we'd found in the cabinet the day before. Robert had his pocket knife out, not doing anything with it, just holding it. And me? I couldn't stop looking at the porch, at the space where the statue used to be, until I returned it to the reef trench. Yet somehow, I still felt its presence, like the grain of the wood where it had sat was watching me now, still warm, still waiting. We had passed the line. Whatever was happening here, we weren't just guests anymore. We were part of it. Liv finally broke the silence. I think we should read more of the journal, Robert scoffed. Great. Maybe the dead guy who wrote it can tell us how to outrun Cthulhu Jr. I'm serious, she said. Well, this thing you saw underwater. If there's a connection, maybe whoever wrote this saw it too. She flipped through the pages. Faded ink, water damage, but the entries were dated. The earliest was from 1924. The name signed under the first entry was Dr. Lewis H. Mallory, a marine biologist. The first page was innocent enough. Notes about marine life around the archipelago, reef behavior, tides. But then things started to change. Sketches appeared. Strange fish with translucent eyes, mollusks with spiral mouths. By the fourth entry, Dr. Mallory had drawn something that made Liv pale. The statue. Identical. He called it the Child of Jarrett. In the margin, scrawled in frantic pen, returned once every century, bound to blood, bound to breach. One must become, one must remember. The wind picked up outside. It whistled in the boards. The lamp flickered again. I got up and closed the shutters. Keep reading, I said. Liv turned the page. The next entry was more like a confession than a report. The dreams persist. They whisper from the trench. A voice layered upon itself, beckoning. When I placed the idol back, they marked me. I am not alone in my mind anymore. They came to the island long before the Spanish ever mapped it. The islanders call them Valari, deep ones, shifters of tide and time. Jarrett is not a god, it's a wound, and it needs to feed. I looked at Liv. Valari? She nodded slowly. There was a word scrawled on the chapel door when we first passed it. Looked like tribal paint. I didn't say anything because it felt wrong. Great, Robert muttered. So we're cursed by underwater vampires with a flair for the dramatic. No, Marcy whispered. Worse, we've been chosen. Later that afternoon, the thing came closer. We were in the back, boarding up the windows, when Marcy screamed. We ran to the front. There it was. He was on the steps, just standing, arms by his sides, head tilted. Charlie. Except not. His skin looked stretched, too taut across the face, like a balloon a breath away from popping. His lips didn't move when he spoke, but his voice was in our heads. We remember you. Robert raised the pocket knife. The thing cocked its head. Then it blinked sideways and smiled. We didn't open the door. We didn't move. We just waited, and then he turned and walked away, into the jungle again. Like it had tested something and we failed. Night came early. The clouds swallowed the horizon, and it was darker than anything I'd ever seen. No stars, no bugs, no sounds, like the island had taken a breath and held it. Marcy wouldn't eat. Robert paced like a caged animal. Liv kept scribbling in the journal, her own notes now crowding the margins of Mallory's madness. I lay on my bunk, staring at the ceiling. It creaked sometimes. The attic above. No one had gone up there since the first day. Just dust, spider webs, and broken furniture. Or so we thought. That was the first time I heard it. Scraping, slow, deliberate, something being dragged. Above us. I sat up, held my breath. The others heard it too. We all turned toward the ceiling at the same time. Please, Marcy whispered. Please don't go up there. I'm not going up there, Robert snapped. But we need to know if something's already in here. Liv closed the journal. Tomorrow. At daylight. Not now. The scraping stopped. Dead quiet. Too quiet. Then, a knock. From the attic door. Not from outside. From inside. We didn't sleep, and when morning finally came, the first thing we saw as we stepped outside was the chapel, the one at the edge of the trees. Its door was open, and a trail of footprints, bare, wet, webbed, led from the cabin to its altar, waiting, calling. Not just bare feet, but webbed toes, and a peculiar indentation near the arch, like a fifth toe had never evolved at all. The tracks glistened, wet against the morning dirt, even though it hadn't rained in days. They led from our cabin door, across the overgrown path, to the chapel we'd all avoided since day one. The building looked like it had been swallowed and then spat back out by the jungle. Wooden slats warped, roof sagging. Vines like veins wrapped around the bell tower. The white cross that once adorned the top had fallen and now lay half buried in mud, upside down. Robert reached for the door first. It creaked on rusted hinges. Inside it was dark, thick with a smell like old seawater and rotting parchment. The pews were gone. In their place, a ring of stones. At the center, a raised stone basin filled with seawater, black and still. And above the altar, scrawled in something reddish-brown and crusted, were the words, "To return is to remember." Marcy stayed back. This place shouldn't exist. Chapels don't smell like the ocean. Liv walked slowly to the basin. The water inside rippled, though there was no wind, no movement. Then she reached into her pocket and took out the journal. "I think Dr. Mallory came here," she murmured. "I think this is where he—" A sound cut her off. Plink. Something hit the floor near the altar. A tooth. Yellowed. Human. We all froze. Then another. Plink. Plink. More teeth dropped. From nowhere. From above. From inside the walls. I grabbed Liv by the arm. "We need to go, now." Robert backed toward the door. "Guys." We turned. In the doorway stood Charlie again, still smiling, but now his mouth was missing teeth. We bolted. We ran through the trees, trampling brush, scraping against branches. The jungle seemed closer, more twisted. The paths we remembered were gone. No trail, no sun. Just a haze and that feeling, like something was watching from just out of sight. When we made it back to the cabin, Marcy was sobbing. Robert threw the door shut and bolted it. I checked every window twice. Liv leaned over the sink, retching. "What the hell was that?" Robert asked. "Why did it have teeth? Our teeth?" I didn't answer. I didn't know. Marcy wiped her face. "We can't stay here. We need to leave. Today." "There's no boat," Liv said. "You saw it. It's gone." "Then we build a raft. Swim, something." "No one's swimming off this island," I said. "There's something in that water." They all stared at me. "What did you see, Will?" I hesitated. Then I told them. I told them about the trench, the statue, the dreams, the vision I saw after returning the idol, about the voice, and the words burned into my thoughts. "You are of the blood." Liv looked pale. "Do you think this has to do with your family?" I nodded. "My great-uncle Randy? He disappeared here in the 90s. I thought it was just an accident. But the journal, Dr. Mallory said this thing returns every century. And Randy came to investigate disappearances, just like we did." Marcy stood, trembling. "So what now? What do we do?" Liv opened the journal again. "There's a page marked with a symbol," she said. "It matches the one over the altar in the chapel, a kind of spiral inside a triangle. Mallory called it the eye beneath. He said there's a cave near the eastern cliffs that connects to the trench. If he's right, maybe there's a way to break the connection. End the cycle." Robert scoffed. "Or maybe that's where people go when they disappear." "We have to try," I said. "If we stay here, we die, or worse." Liv stared at me. "If we go, we might become part of it." That afternoon, we packed. We didn't speak much, just moved like ghosts through the cabin, gathering what little food, tools, and supplies we had. Liv tore out the cave entry from the journal and folded it into her pocket. Marcy refused to take anything, just clutched a necklace I'd never seen her wear before. Something with a faded silver medallion, etched with a sun and 2 crescent moons. "My grandmother gave this to my mom," she whispered when she saw me watching. "She said it protects against things from the deep." I thought she meant depression. I almost laughed, but couldn't. As twilight came, we started toward the cliffs. The jungle was unnaturally quiet again. No birds. No insects, just our breathing and the crunch of leaves beneath our feet. Occasionally we saw signs, a discarded shoe, a rusted tin spoon, a doll half sunk in mud, all weathered, all old. As if the island didn't just kill people, but kept them, pieces of them. When we reached the ridge, we saw a yawning cave mouth, shaped like an open jaw rimmed with limestone teeth. Something shimmered inside. Not water, not quite. A membrane? Anyone else think this is a bad idea? Robert said. We stepped inside anyway. The air was thick, wet, humming with energy. The tunnel sloped downward gradually. The walls were slick with moss. Symbols carved into stone. Spirals, eyes, fish with too many fins. The deeper we went, the more the air pulsed, like a heartbeat. And then we heard it. A voice, not a scream, not a whisper, a chant, low, alien, layered. It didn't come from ahead. It came from behind. We turned. Robert wasn't there anymore. Only his flashlight, still flickering on the cave floor. The flashlight flickered once, then died. We screamed his name. Robert! But the only thing that answered was our own breath bouncing off the wet stone. The cave swallowed sound the way it swallowed light, muting everything into a humid humming silence. Liv grabbed my arm, hard enough to bruise. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. Marcy stood frozen a few steps behind us, lips moving without sound, like she was praying or cursing. I stepped forward to grab the flashlight. It was still warm, as if it had just been dropped. But there was no sign of Robert. Not a footstep. No air displacement. No shuffle of movement. He had simply ceased. Liv leaned in close. Something's wrong with time down here. I didn't answer, but I felt it too. We pressed on. The tunnel twisted downward into a deeper black. We took out our backup headlamps, but the beams only pushed the dark a few feet ahead. Shadows clung to the walls like wet fabric, heavy and reluctant to leave. About 10 minutes in, the air grew colder, thicker. It felt like we were breathing through gauze soaked in seawater. The symbols on the walls became denser, cruder, angrier. Spines, jagged fishhooks, eyes with slit pupils and mouth sewn shut. One of them looked like it had been scratched in by fingernails, not tools. Marcy slowed, trailing her fingers over a symbol. I saw this before, she murmured. In my dream last night. A woman standing over me. She carved this into her chest. We exchanged glances. You didn't tell us that, Liv said, voice tight. I didn't remember until now. Eventually, we reached a chamber. Wide, circular, too symmetrical to be natural. In the center was a dais of black stone, slick with moisture. On top of it, what looked like an altar basin, identical to the one in the chapel. But this one wasn't filled with water. It was filled with teeth, hundreds of them, small, human, baby teeth, all arranged in concentric circles as if they were meant to form something, like a sigil. Marcy backed away instantly. No, this is wrong. But Liv stepped closer. She pointed toward the far wall. There's something else here. It was a mural. Half carved, half painted, spanning 20 feet across. It showed them. The islanders. The first ones, we guessed. Not quite human. Elongated limbs, gill-like slits on their necks. Some with wide eyes and circular mouths drawn in a scream. They were kneeling, arms raised to a great shape looming above them, dark and tentacled, hovering over a trench in the sea, and below the trench, deeper still, a spiral, etched in glowing blue paint, the only color in the whole mural. It pulsed faintly in our headlamps, as though it had been painted with something radioactive, or alive. Liv whispered, "That's the eye beneath, the thing they worshipped." Marcy crossed her arms. Worshipped, or feared. Suddenly the floor shook, not violently, but with a low rolling pulse, like a heartbeat beneath our feet. The spiral on the wall shimmered brighter. The teeth in the altar clinked gently against one another. Then came the chanting, same as before, but closer now, and louder. It wasn't coming from behind us anymore, it was coming from below. "Run," I said. Back up the tunnel, we spun. just in time to see water trickling up from the cracks in the floor. At first, just a shimmer, then a stream, then a flood. The passage behind us was no longer a tunnel. It was a throat, filling with water. We ran in the only direction we could, deeper. The ground sloped hard. My knees ached from the angle. The light from our headlamps flickered wildly as we bounced against stone. The chanting grew louder, merging with the thundering sound of rushing water behind us. Marcy slipped, screamed. I caught her arm, pulled her back up. Liv shouted something, but her voice warped. It echoed off the walls and came back distorted, in a lower pitch. Not her voice anymore. Something else. Something mocking. When we finally collapsed into the next chamber, I knew we had passed into some place that had no name, as the walls were breathing. The room was huge, no ceiling we could see, just blackness above, and more of that blue spiral carved into the floor. It was etched into the stone with what looked like bones, some polished into shapes, others just jammed in like crude offerings. At the center was a stone podium. Upon it, a mask. Or maybe not a mask. It looked like a face. Too symmetrical, too perfect. Eyes shut. Skin dark and smooth like it had been sculpted from obsidian. I stepped closer, despite the way my instincts screamed to turn back. Liv grabbed my arm. "That's not just a face. That's a vessel." "For what?" Marcy whispered. I didn't answer, because I had just heard something from above, a familiar voice. "Will!" It was Robert. But when I looked up, I didn't see him. I saw his silhouette walking down the far side of the chamber. Slow, barefoot, and humming a lullaby I remembered from childhood. Only Robert didn't know that song, only my mother did. The silhouette continued moving across the far side of the chamber. Slow, deliberate, feet bare against stone. Robert, or what looked like Robert, stepped into the faint edge of our headlamp's glow. But his skin, it shimmered like oil slick on seawater. And his eyes were wrong. They weren't eyes anymore, just dark pits, like something had hollowed him out and slipped inside to wear him like a mask. "Will," the thing said again, voice gliding over the rocks. "I remember you. I remember when your father brought you here, before you were even born." Liv's hand went rigid in mine. "It's not him." "I know," I whispered, "because Robert, real Robert, never met my father." Marcy stepped forward despite the shaking in her legs. "If you're not Robert," she asked, "then what are you?" The thing tilted its head, jerky, too quick. "I am the mouth," it said, "and the mouth speaks when the spiral opens." Then it knelt, not to us, to the face on the altar. It began to chant, low, rhythmic, syllables that didn't belong to any human tongue. The walls echoed back the sound, overlapping it until it became a suffocating wave of vibrations that filled our ears and made our teeth ache. I stumbled back. The floor beneath me was no longer just cold. It was breathing, rising and falling like the belly of a sleeping animal. Something massive beneath us was stirring. "Get out," Liv said, her voice breaking. "We have to get out now." We turned, but the tunnel behind us was gone, or rather, it had changed. It now split in 3 directions, none of which we recognized, and each of them pulsed with a sickly blue light, like veins illuminated from within. "This isn't possible," Marcy whispered. "This isn't real." But it was. The cave was alive, and it was shifting, and somehow I understood. "We have to choose," I said. "The wrong tunnel leads to the sea." "The sea?" Liv echoed. "We're inside the island." I looked at her. Exactly. We picked the center tunnel. It felt like instinct, or something older than instinct, like the island wanted us to take that path. Maybe it was guiding us, or maybe it was playing with us. The path narrowed fast. Our shoulders scraped the walls. It smelled like copper and rotting flowers. Strange carvings appeared again, serpentine figures twined with human limbs, mouths sewn shut, eyes scratched out. The tunnel opened into a room that didn't fit with the others. Wooden walls, a slanted roof, a floor of warped pine. It was a house. More specifically, it was our house, the rental we'd stayed in, the one by the dock. Everything inside was the same, except it wasn't. There was salt water on the floor, dripping from the ceiling, trickling down the walls. The furniture was warped and bloated, like it had been underwater for days. A trail of wet footprints led from the front door to the hallway. We followed it in silence. The hallway was darker than it should have been. Our headlamps only reached a few feet ahead. The wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing words underneath, dozens of them: feed the depth, birth the spiral, silence the mouth. A bedroom door creaked open on its own. Inside, a crib. An old wooden one. Something moved inside it. I raised my light and stared. Inside the crib was a child, a newborn, but its skin was translucent, veins pulsing with blue light. Its eyes were open, completely white, and its mouth was impossibly wide, jaw stretching nearly to its chest. It didn't cry. It hummed, the same lullaby Robert, no, the thing wearing Robert, had hummed before. The moment my light hit it, the humming stopped. The thing smiled at me and whispered, "Welcome home." Liv yanked me backward just as the crib burst apart, the thing inside shrieking in a pitch that cracked glass. We stumbled into the hallway, only to find the walls closing in, like a lung exhaling around us. We sprinted out the door, into night. Not the cave, not the jungle, but night. Except the stars weren't right. They spun in slow spirals overhead, drawn toward a single point directly above us. A tear in the sky that pulsed with dim blue light. Marcy dropped to her knees. "This isn't Earth." She was right. The island had changed. Or we had. We walked toward the edge of the trees, hoping to find the shoreline. Instead, we found the altar. Not the same one as before. This was bigger, carved directly into the earth, surrounded by rows of standing stones. Something huge lay in the center, covered by a tarp of stitched-together sails and fishing nets. It pulsed faintly, as if breathing. A figure stood beside it. It was Randy, my uncle, alive. He looked older, weary, and when he saw me, he shook his head, slowly. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. I took a step forward. "We thought you were..." "I was, and I still am." "What does that mean?" He looked past me at the sky. "There are things you survive, and there are things you become." Then the tarp twitched. Something beneath it moved, and something under my skin moved in response. The thing beneath the tarp was breathing in time with me, and I wasn't sure which of us had started first. My legs locked in place. Every instinct screamed to run, but my body stayed rooted like the altar itself had claimed me. A thick wind moved through the trees, not rustling the leaves but bending the trunks, as though something immense were exhaling from beneath the earth. Randy didn't blink. He didn't flinch. His hands hung limp by his sides, fingers mottled with old scars and dirt embedded under the nails. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. "I asked you not to come," he said again, quieter this time, eyes flickering to Liv, Marcy, then back to me. "I tried everything to keep this buried." "You're alive," I said, my voice dry, cracked. "Everyone thought I was gone. For a while." He looked up at the spiral in the sky, pulsing like a distant lighthouse. "Then it brought me back, because it needed someone who knew." We stood at the edge of the stone circle while the wind howled without moving the grass. Liv stepped forward. "What the hell is going on here?" Randy's eyes met hers. "You've seen pieces, haven't you? The house that wasn't a house, the baby that wasn't a child, the sea where there was no sea." Liv hesitated. "How did you know?" "Because that's how it starts," he sighed. "The island shows you its dreams, then it shows you the truth, and then it shows you yourself." He pointed to the thing under the tarp. "That's what happens if you stay too long." None of us asked what it was, because we knew, on a level deeper than knowledge. It was hunger. coiled and breathing and half-born. It was becoming something, and it had our faces. Randy turned away from it. "Come. You don't have much time before it forgets your guests." He led us down a path that hadn't been there before. The trees bent away from him. The village was real, or used to be. Dozens of wooden huts, long since collapsed under vines and moss. Totems carved with unfamiliar symbols lined the perimeter. Faces of animals that were almost human, eyes sunken, mouths bound by wooden nails. At the center was a stone tower, short and wide, shaped like an upturned well. Smoke curled from its top, though no fire burned. "This was Jarrett B," Randy said, "before the government wiped it off the maps." Liv frowned. "So, this was a real place?" He nodded. "Fishing commune. Broke off from the mainland in the 1800s. Religious cult, basically. They called themselves the Brothers of the Spiral Tide." Marcy scoffed. "Of course they did." Randy stopped walking. "They believed the world wasn't built on land and sky, but on layers. Beneath everything is the deep spiral, an ocean not of water, but of time, memory, blood." He looked at me then, not angrily, almost gently. "That's where your father went when he disappeared. Not just off the island, below it." My stomach turned. "You knew? You knew he came here?" Randy nodded. "He came looking for someone, just like you did." The wind shifted again, and with it came the faint sound of bells, not metal but hollow wooden ones, distant, rhythmic, like a funeral procession underwater. I stepped toward the old well at the center, and this is where it starts. "This is where it ends," Randy said. "If you're not careful." Inside the stone circle, the temperature dropped. The air felt heavier, like the pressure before a storm. The tower wasn't just stone. It was fused bone and rock, fossilized into grotesque patterns. Symbols I'd seen before. On the altar, in the cave, under the skin of the thing that wore Robert's face. "Why are we here?" Marcy asked. "Because you need to see what happens when someone answers the spiral." He reached into the folds of his jacket and pulled out an old journal, leather-bound, edges burnt, stained by salt and age. I recognized it instantly. "My dad's," I whispered. Randy handed it to me without a word. The pages were warped but legible, each one filled with feverish drawings, spirals, mouths, sea creatures with human hands. Diagrams of rituals, maps that changed from page to page. Then I reached the page with the photograph. It was torn, water damaged. A group of people in white robes stood in a circle around the altar. One of them, in the center, had their face scratched out. But I knew that shape, that stance. It was me. I dropped the journal. Randy didn't move to pick it up. "Time is circular here," he said softly. "The spiral doesn't obey linear memory. That's why no one escapes. That's why the villagers merged with it." Marcy looked sick. "Merged?" "You'll see." The ground beneath the stone tower began to vibrate, slow and steady, like a heartbeat. The bells in the distance grew louder, and from the woods behind us came footsteps, slow, dragging, dozens of them. Not frantic, deliberate. Figures emerged into the clearing, but they weren't fully human anymore. Their skin glistened like wet parchment, stretched thin over knotted joints. Some had barnacles growing along their spines. Others trailed seaweed behind them like tails. Their mouths were sewn shut with fishbone thread, and their eyes burned with blue light. And I recognized two of them, Charlie's hoodie, Abdul's boots. Liv backed away. "They're still alive." Randy's expression darkened. "No, but the spiral remembers what it consumed." Randy didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't move at all. The figures moved with ritualistic precision, circling us slowly, their barnacled heads tilting in unison. They weren't attacking. They were watching. Their sewn mouths didn't move, but the pressure in the air thickened, and the silence roared louder than any scream. "They're not here to hurt us," Randy murmured, though his voice trembled. "Not unless we speak out of turn." "What the hell does that mean?" Liv hissed. He slowly raised his hands. No sudden movements, no questions. Just follow. A gap opened in their ranks, like the sea parting, and a new figure emerged. It was taller than the rest, robed in something that looked like kelp fused with cloth. Around its neck hung a string of wooden bells, each carved with that spiral symbol we'd seen since arriving. Its face wasn't covered, but it wasn't a face anymore. Just smooth flesh where eyes should be. A long, vertical slit for a mouth, puckered and glistening. When it moved, you could hear the wet suck of its skin against the air. Randy dropped to his knees. "I didn't call them," he whispered, "but they know you're here." We were herded, gently, eerily, toward the base of the tower. No one touched us. The creatures only watched, heads tilting rhythmically like they were listening to a song none of us could hear. Inside, the tower opened into a pit. It wasn't empty. Coiled at the bottom, asleep, or pretending to sleep, was something. Enormous, pale gray flesh that shimmered like fish scales. Hundreds of limbs twisted in knots around its form. It had no discernible head, but faces, dozens of them, protruded randomly across its body. Some were human, some weren't. They pulsed, blinked, whispered in languages I couldn't understand. "It's called the Rememberer," Randy said softly, standing behind me. "The spiral gave it form. It feeds on identity. It stores what it devours." "It eats people," Marcy whispered, backing away. "It eats memory," Randy corrected. "It stores the soul. The body becomes irrelevant." As if in response, one of the faces opened its mouth and spoke. It was Robert's voice. "Will, I'm cold. You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have brought them." I felt my knees give out. My hand gripped the stone edge of the pit so hard I felt blood bloom from my palm. I couldn't look away. Liv was weeping silently. Marcy stared in horror as a second voice echoed up. It was hers, a perfect imitation of her voice, sobbing. "I want to go home. I want to go home." She took a step back and vomited onto the floor, and he crouched next to her, murmuring a prayer. Or perhaps an apology. This is the cost of calling the spiral. It shows you the self you tried to forget, and then it keeps it. A tremor rippled through the floor. The Rememberer twitched. A ripple passed through its coiled mass and several faces vanished into its flesh, replaced by new ones. One of them had my father's eyes, and he was smiling. "You lied," I said to Randy, my voice hoarse. "You said he came here looking for someone. He was called, just like we were." Randy didn't deny it. "I told myself it was a rescue," he said, "but deep down, I knew. The spiral chooses." The tall robed figure stepped forward, raising one long-fingered hand toward me. A sound escaped its mouth, not quite speech, but a clicking sequence, like wind through bone. Randy translated. "It asks, do you remember your first dream?" "What?" "It means you've reached the threshold," Randy said. "Before you can go further, you must recall the moment the spiral first touched you." Liv clutched my arm. "Will, don't answer. You don't owe it anything." But I did remember. Not here, not now, but years ago. I was 7. I'd fallen into a quarry behind our house. I remembered the water, cold as death, the dark below. But there was something in it. A spiral, drifting like a jellyfish, glowing. It spoke without words. It showed me faces. And I woke up days later, with no memory of how I got out. I looked at the creature. "Yes," I whispered. "I remember." The tower rumbled, and the Rememberer moved. The ground cracked beneath us. Faces screamed in unison. The coiled mass began to unfurl, and I saw, deep in its center, a black opening, like an eye. No light, no bottom, just pull. The spiral, it wasn't a symbol, it was a gate, and it had waited for me. The creatures around us began to sway, chanting in that same clicking rhythm. Randy reached into his coat again and pulled out something wrapped in red cloth. He held it out to me. "The only way to pass through and come back is with this." I took it. It was a tooth, but it pulsed. "Your father left this for you," he said. It's part of what he gave up, his memory, his name. If you carry it, the spiral will remember you. What happens if I drop it? You forget yourself, forever. Suddenly, one of the villagers shrieked. It wasn't ritual, it was panic. From the forest, smoke rose. Black, oily, choking. Marcy screamed, "The camp!" Liv turned. "The flare! We lit the flare!" I froze. Someone was coming, but it wasn't rescue. The spiral didn't allow rescue. Randy's face went pale. "Oh God," he whispered, "you brought it with you." And then we heard it, the sound of something wet, dragging across rock, and a voice, not human, saying my name in my voice. Will, Y-L-L. The voice had my tone, my pitch, my breath pattern, but it wasn't mine. I turned, heart slamming against my ribs, to see the source of the imitation. It echoed through the crumbling arch of the tower like a corrupted recording, stuttering, wheezing, whispering. Will, come down." Liv backed toward the wall, flashlight quivering in her grip. Marcy was frozen in place, lips parted in silent terror. The villagers, once eerily calm, were scattering into the shadows like leaves in a current. Only Randy stood his ground, and even he looked pale beneath the torchlight. "They're not supposed to speak like that," he murmured. "That's not the Rememberer." Then the stench hit us. Wet iron, burnt hair, and beneath it all, the familiar smell of salt water and rot. The scent that had followed us since the beach. Liv gagged and dropped to her knees. From the spiral pit behind us, the Rememberer shuddered, recoiling like a slug doused with flame. Several of its faces twisted and screamed. Others vanished into the folds of its flesh. Randy grabbed my arm. "We have to leave, now." We stumbled out of the tower into chaos. Smoke rolled over the clearing like a living thing, thick and black and unnatural. The temperature dropped sharply, our breath fogging in the air despite the island's usual humidity. Something, somewhere, was moving through the woods, just beyond sight. We could hear it. Branches cracking, leaves crunching, a low rasp like something dragging fingernails across bark. A second voice joined the first. It was Robert. But not Robert as we remembered him. His voice was slow, drooping, like every syllable had been soaked in honey and acid. "Will, you said you'd protect us." I clenched my teeth, fighting the nausea rising in my throat. It wasn't just fear, it was recognition. That voice triggered something buried deep, a memory I didn't own, but one that still belonged to me. Randy kept pulling me forward. "It's not real. It's what the spiral uses. It mimics, absorbs lies, but it needs you to believe." We reached the tree line, where the dense woods swallowed the moonlight. The trail back toward the camp had been scorched. Flames hadn't just burned the foliage, they'd blackened the soil itself, as if the earth had bled and been cauterized. Marcy stopped, pointing with a trembling finger. There was someone ahead, a silhouette, not one of the villagers, not alive in any normal sense. Its body was grotesquely long, like its spine had been stretched beyond reason. It crawled on elbows and knees, head twisting 180 degrees without effort. A pale mask hung over its face, Robert's face, stitched to the creature's skin. Liv screamed. The thing bolted toward us. Randy threw something to the ground, a pouch of dried leaves and bone fragments. The second it hit, the area erupted in green flame. The creature screeched, veering back into the smoke. "That was a ward," he growled. "I don't have many left." "What is that?" Marcy cried. "Not spiral-born," Randy said grimly. "Spiral-warped, the ones who tried to leave. The island doesn't let them, so reuses them." I tasted bile. "What do you mean, reuses?" Randy didn't answer. We pressed deeper into the jungle, now a web of twitching trees and knotted roots. The island had changed. The terrain shifted beneath our feet, as if trying to lead us astray. At one point, we circled back to a familiar moss-covered boulder 3 times, each time from a different direction. "This isn't geography," Liv whispered. "It's ritual." Randy nodded. "The spiral warps perception. This is part of its defense. Only a marked soul can break through the loop." "And who's marked?" He looked at me. "You are." I felt the pressure behind my eyes building. My chest tightened, not with panic, but with something stranger. Like I was remembering something that hadn't happened yet, a version of myself trapped in a spiral, endlessly looping back to this moment. The tooth. I gripped it tighter in my pocket. It pulsed. Once, twice, then calmed. The jungle opened up before us, a narrow path lit faintly by glowing fungi lining the trees. Marcy was the first to speak again. "My brother," she whispered. "He came here last year. They said he died on a dive, that he got pulled out by the current. But he saw something before he drowned. He called me crying. Said there was an eye in the reef, a spiral. He said it blinked. None of us spoke, because we'd all heard a version of that story. Family members, friends, strangers who'd gone missing at sea. Every one of us had a thread leading here. We reached the shrine just as the chanting began again. Not from villagers, from the island itself. The trees whispered in that same clicking rhythm. The rocks hummed. The water nearby gurgled in time. In the center of the clearing was a slab of obsidian, covered in barnacles and dried blood. Symbols carved deep, spirals within spirals, formed a pattern that hurt the eyes to look at. Randy knelt beside it. "This is the offering stone." "What are we offering?" Liv asked. Randy looked up, face drawn. "Yourselves." Before anyone could argue, the sound came again. Dragging flesh, clicking jaws. Then a laugh. Not a joyful one, a mocking, inhuman cackle that echoed from every direction. I turned, flashlight scanning the trees, and saw it, crawling upside down along a tree trunk, head twisted backwards, smiling. It wore my face. It wore my face, but its eyes were wrong. Too wide, too dark, like they had no end. The thing clung to the tree upside down, limbs bending the wrong way, smiling with a mouth too big, too knowing. Its skin shimmered, not like flesh, but like the surface of oil on water, shifting with colors I couldn't name, shifting with memory of mine. The creature dropped silently to the forest floor. It didn't move toward us. It just stood, staring, mirroring my posture. Then it whispered, "You left him. You let him drown." A jolt ran down my spine. The others couldn't have heard that, not clearly. But I saw the change in Liv's and Marcy's faces. They felt it. The same guilt, the same psychic echo. I stepped forward. The thing mirrored me. One hand to the side, the other to the pocket with the tooth. But I hadn't moved my hand yet. It knew. Randy pulled me back. "Don't engage. That's a remembered husk. It doesn't kill like the others. It undoes, makes you forget who you are, layer by layer, until you become it." "How do we stop it?" "You don't," he said. "You pass its test, or it takes your shape forever." I turned back to it, and it was closer. No movement, no footsteps, just nearer, like distance didn't apply to it. The forest held its breath. Then the husk raised its hand and pointed directly at Marcy. "You knew he wouldn't make it," it said in her voice. Marcy staggered back, clutching her chest. "Your brother," the husk hissed. "You didn't warn him. You wanted to be the one they remembered." "Shut up," Marcy screamed. It didn't flinch. Its smile widened, cracked down to the jawline, revealing teeth too sharp, too many. "She's cracking," Liv whispered. "It's feeding." I stepped forward again, this time holding out the tooth. The husk froze. "I remember," I said. Its head tilted. "I remember what you are." The ground beneath us pulsed. The creature hissed, like steam escaping from a dying machine, and lunged. The air broke around us. No other word fit. The space between me and the husk shattered like glass. I was thrown back, my body slamming against tree roots, breath knocked clean from my lungs. Liv screamed. Randy dragged Marcy to the warded circle. The husk didn't follow. It writhed in the broken air, caught like an insect in amber. The tooth in my hand glowed with faint blue light. Randy pulled me up. "It won't hold forever." "Where do we go?" "To the spiral heart. The jungle thinned as we pushed forward. Every root, every shadow seemed aware of us now. Not in a passive way, in the way prey becomes watched, judged. The air buzzed, full of the whisper language. Clicks, moans, ancient syllables the human mouth couldn't reproduce. Yet some part of me understood them. The spiral wanted something, had always wanted something, and I was the only one left who could give it. We reached the clearing. At the center, a massive sinkhole, lined with black stone, spiraling down like a drill into the earth. Water lapped at its edge, brackish, half silid, half fluid. Bones littered the shoreline, picked clean. Symbols carved deep into the rocks glowed softly, pulsing with my heartbeat. Marcy broke the silence. "Is this where it began?" Randy nodded. "Where the first sacrifice was made." Liv looked at me. "What now?" The answer came from below. A voice, my mother's voice, singing an old lullaby she used to hum when I had nightmares. But she'd been dead for years. I dropped to my knees. The spiral was inside me now, not just whispering, but humming through my bones, threading through memory, past, identity. I couldn't separate what was real and what was implanted. "I need to go down," I said. Liv grabbed my arm. "No, don't be stupid. She's not real," Randy said. "It's the spiral mimicking her." I turned to him. "No, it's not just mimicry, it's retrieval. It doesn't create, it remembers. I'm part of this, Randy, you know I am." He hesitated. Then slowly he pulled a small blade from his belt, a curved obsidian knife etched with spirals. "Then you'll need this." I descended alone. The stone was slick, the path uneven. I followed the spiral downward, light dimming with each step. The air grew colder, denser, soaked in centuries of prayer, pain, and offerings. The humming grew clearer, now layered with whispers, names I recognized, family, friends, myself. The spiral was everywhere down here. It was the walls, the water, the memories I hadn't lived, the fears I didn't know I had. At the bottom was a pool, not water. Memory, liquid thought, rippling with faces and voices and echoes. I saw Robert, floating, eyes open, mouth moving but not breathing. He saw me and smiled. I waded in, cold like knives. The moment my skin touched it, I felt them. All of them. The villagers, the vanished, my ancestors, the priestess, the children. "The spiral doesn't kill," a voice said inside me. "It collects." "What do you want?" I asked aloud. The answer came not in words, but in vision. A small girl with my mother's eyes, a storm swallowing the island, a tooth breaking between lips, a door opened by choice, and then a mirror. I reached for it, my reflection blinked, but I hadn't. Somewhere in that black water I remembered dying, but I never stopped breathing. The moment my fingertips grazed the surface of the spiral's pool, everything shattered. I wasn't standing in the cavern anymore, I was inside it. Inside me, or what I had once been. The cave dissolved into pulsing, living memory. Not just mine, theirs. 1,000, maybe more. Thoughts, regrets, rituals, all weaving through my consciousness like vines choking a dying tree. Robert's face appeared first, but this time it wasn't the smiling husk I'd seen in the pool. He was sitting beside me, cross-legged on a floor of bone and moss, whispering my name, Will. I turned. His eyes weren't right, no pupils, only a spiral of light spinning endlessly inward. "You followed it," he said. I nodded. "You shouldn't have." He raised his hand and placed it on my chest. The entire world fell inward. Suddenly, I was no longer in control of my body. I was reliving Robert's last moments. His fear, his drowning panic, the call from beneath the water, not like a voice, but like gravity for the soul. He hadn't fallen, he'd been pulled, and now so was I. The spiral wanted to consume me, not physically but mentally, layer by layer, strip away the identity, the memories, the emotions, until there was nothing left but a vessel. But I wasn't empty. Not yet. From deep within the memory fog, a single anchor held fast. The obsidian knife. I reached for it. Back in the cavern, my body convulsed. Blood poured from my nose, ears, the corners of my eyes. Liv screamed from somewhere far above. Her voice echoed down the shaft. But I couldn't respond. The spiral was binding me, threading me into its web. But it had made one mistake. It let me remember. And memory is sharp. Sharper than ritual, sharper than fear. I slashed with the obsidian blade, not through flesh, but through the veil around me. The spiral screamed, not in sound but in feeling, a dissonant wave of grief, hunger, and loss so great it cracked the bones of reality. The water exploded. I flew upward, lifted not by force but by choice. The spiral rejected me. I was tainted now, too full of will, of defiance, of truth. I landed hard at the edge of the pool, coughing up black liquid that evaporated before it hit the stone. Liv and Randy were there, pulling me back, eyes wide with fear and awe. Marcy stood behind them, holding something. A mask, white bone-like with a spiral etched across its face. "Where did you get that?" I gasped. She didn't answer. Her eyes weren't hers anymore. "I saw it," Marcy said slowly. "What you saw. What it wants. What you are." "What I am?" I whispered. Randy stepped between us, his hand already on his belt, where the last vial of salt water hung. "She's not stable," he said. "She's been marked." "No," Marcy said, stepping closer, eyes unblinking. "I've been chosen." And then she lunged. I barely saw the blade in her hand. It came from nowhere, smooth, curved, carved with the same spirals we'd seen all over the island. Randy intercepted her, but she was fast, faster than she should have been. Something inside her was guiding her limbs, not her own reflexes. The spirals. Liv screamed. I tried to reach them, but pain seared through my chest. My body still not mine, still caught halfway between realms. Randy and Marcy fell together, bodies twisting on the stone, then silence. One of them didn't move. I crawled forward, dizzy, heart pounding. Randy was bleeding from the side but alive, barely. The knife had missed his heart. Marcy lay still, her hand still clutching the mask. Her lips twitched. Then her body convulsed, and with a sickening crack, her spine arched backward, limbs flailing unnaturally. "Back!" Liv shouted. Marcy's voice wasn't hers anymore. It was all of theirs. The spiral spoke through her mouth. Too late. The ground shook. Symbols on the walls ignited, pulsing like the heartbeat of the earth. The pool rose, boiling, hissing, spilling over its edge. The spiral wasn't just waking, it was coming through. The ritual had never been about summoning. It was about birth, and we were the midwives. Randy gritted his teeth and held out the vial of salt water. "This is the last one. If we're doing it, we're doing it now." "Doing what?" Liv shouted over the roaring wind. "Ending it," I said, "or at least sealing it. Again." Randy nodded. We began the chant. The words weren't ours. They came from somewhere else. Somewhere old. But the spiral recoiled at their sound. It twisted Marcy's body, trying to flee, to silence us, but the mask began to crack in her hand. The spiral had anchored itself in her. If we destroyed the vessel, it would be contained, not gone, but held. The knife in my hand pulsed. Liv grabbed my arm. "You're not doing this alone." We moved as one. The spiral shrieked. The mask shattered, and the cavern went white. When the white faded, there was no sound, no water, no wind, no breath, just a ringing in my skull and the scorched scent of something ancient, something that shouldn't burn but had. We were still in the cavern, but it was quiet now. The spiral markings had gone dark. The pool no longer churned. The air, once thick with pressure and voices that didn't belong, had stilled like the eye of a storm long past. Marcy's body lay crumpled by the edge of the stone. The mask was gone, Randy was unconscious, slumped against the wall, with blood drying across his shirt. Liv knelt beside him, checking his pulse. "He's alive," she said softly, voice hollow. "Just barely." I nodded, but my eyes wouldn't leave the pool. It looked ordinary now, still, silent, but I could still feel it. Something watching, not angry, not grieving, waiting. The spiral hadn't been defeated, only stalled. We carried Randy up the winding tunnel, retracing the path that had led us down into the belly of this god-forsaken island. Each step felt like a lifetime, each breath stolen from someone else's lungs. By the time we reached the surface, dawn had broken. But the sky wasn't the same. No birds, no wind. The sun was there, but dimmer, as if seen through a veil. Jarrett B no longer felt like an island. It felt like a wound, a scar left behind by something that had tried to be born, and nearly succeeded. The boat was still there, somehow. Beached slightly off the rocky shore, the paint scratched and scorched like it had been through fire. I didn't remember tying it down. I didn't remember much of anything after we'd entered the cavern. But it waited, like it knew we would come back. We loaded Randy carefully, made sure he was stable. Then I turned one last time to look at the tree line. The forest didn't look the same. The trees were taller, bending slightly toward the ocean, as if listening for something. And in that stillness, I heard it again. A heartbeat, not mine, not human, but deep, slow, ancient. Like the earth itself had lungs, and it was breathing us out. It took 5 hours to reach the mainland. Liv and I didn't speak. She sat beside Randy, holding his hand like she could anchor him here. Like if she let go, he'd drift back into that cavern and be claimed by whatever was left behind. I steered the boat, but my eyes kept drifting back to the horizon. Jarrett B had already disappeared in the mist, and yet it never really left. They kept us at the hospital for 3 days. Questions were asked, reports were filed. We gave them something half believable: a cave-in, exposure to strange gases, disorientation, an accident. No one dug deeper. No one wanted to, because some places rewrite you, and the further you get from them, the less you want to know what really happened. I stayed in touch with Liv for a while. We met twice after the hospital. The first time, we drank coffee in silence and tried not to look at the spiral tattoo she'd gotten unknowingly burned into her shoulder. The second time, she said she couldn't sleep, that the waves in her bathtub echoed with whispers, that she sometimes forgot who she was. Just for a moment, but long enough to scare herself. She moved inland a week later. I haven't heard from her since. Randy survived, but he never spoke again. Doctors said it was neurological trauma, something irreversible. But I saw the way his eyes flicked sometimes, like he was hearing something. Like he was trying not to speak because he knew whatever came out wouldn't be his voice anymore. I visited him last week. He didn't blink, didn't move, but his fingers traced something over and over on the hospital blanket. A circle, a line curling inward. And me, I left. Sold everything. Moved to the coast. Small town, quiet life. I keep to myself, but I dream. Every night, the spiral, the pool, Robert's face. Sometimes I wake up with water in my lungs. Sometimes I don't wake up at all, or I think I do. But the world is off by just a few degrees. A familiar voice on the radio calls me by the wrong name. A mirror reflection that lags a second behind, like something is bleeding through. Waiting. Always waiting. I told myself this was the last time I'd write it down, that there was nothing else to tell. But last night a letter came. No stamp, no return address, just my name. Inside, a photo, grainy, old. Me, Robert, Charlie, Liv, Marcy, all standing at the edge of this spiral pool. Except we never took a picture down there, and we were all smiling. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of Jarrett B. Some stories are born from fear, others from silence. But this one? This story was carved into the land, whispered by the waves, and if you heard it, if it stayed with you, then maybe You've already been marked by the spiral too. We hope the tale chilled your spine and stirred your thoughts. If you enjoyed the descent into darkness, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who dares to listen, because sometimes stories don't end. They wait, just like the island. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and never ignore the signs. From the shadows, with thanks.